All right, I'm going to stop this or start sharing here in just a moment. We're just going to get started, but for anybody that hasn't yet, please do change your name to include your organization. And it looks like there might be somebody drawing on the screen share. If you wouldn't mind keeping your mouse off of that. I'm not sure exactly how, but the virtual world we live in now. But Alex, whenever we're ready to go.
Yep, we're ready.
All right, everyone. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We just want to let you know this meeting will be recorded, but we are super excited to have you here today with us at our March general meeting of the Erie Food Policy Advisory Council. For those of you that have attended our meetings in the past, this one is going to look a little bit different. Today, we're incredibly excited to be joined by 5 local leaders representing a variety of different neighborhood organizations as well as local governments. Each will speak today about some of the barriers and some of the successes that they've had within their work trying to achieve food security during a pandemic. So let's get started. For those that may have seen the agenda, this is nothing new, but we're going to start with a little welcome and introductions. Then we're going to dive right into the speakers. Now, we encourage you guys to ask questions. However, we're going to keep everyone muted just to limit interruptions and ask that you post your questions in the chat box at the bottom of the screen. Those questions that will be answered via the chat box, and the others that are more specific to one or another speaker will be answered live if we have time. You'll also notice that at the end of each speaker's slides, they'll provide their contact information on the last slide. If you have any questions that weren't answered during the chat box or would just like to reach out, feel free to write that contact information down or screenshot it, or you can reach out to us at the Erie FPAC through our Facebook page. We can provide you with the information or with a recording. So we'll also post this recording to the Erie FPAC YouTube channel. With that, let's get started. So our speakers today are all from Erie and Erie County. We're going to start with Jeremy Bloeser from the Bayfront Eastside Task Force. He's the executive director there, followed by Frantz from our West Bayfront, also the executive director. Gretchen Durney, the West Side neighborhood manager and marketing and contract director, from SSJNN, or the Sisters of St. Joseph Neighborhood Network. Following her, we'll have Dahlkemper, the county executive for Erie County, and Erin Carey, the planning director, who is also working with Kathy Ronstick from the city of Erie. So without further ado, Jeremy, get started. And as you guys need slides, just say slide or signal to me somehow via Zoom. Just say slide, I guess that's easiest.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting us to speak to your committee today. So I am Jeremy Bloeser. I'm the executive director of the Bayfront Eastside Task Force. We're the oldest agency focused on improving a single neighborhood, celebrating over 40 years of our existence. We represent the 30 blocks, basically, that are 6th Street to the Bay and State Street to Wayne. So we're in Erie's historic East Bayfront, where Erie began all of its origins. You can see here a welcoming sign we have at 6th and Parade is sort of our gateway into our neighborhood. I've been the executive director for 10 years. We are a small organization. I have one other full-time staff, and typically we have an AmeriCorps Vista, although without one at the present time. Next slide, Gabriel. So this shows just a sort of the overall footprint of beyond just our neighborhood. This is the entire East Bayfront neighborhood, and this is from Charles Buki's report of Erie Refocused. But what it shows is some of the problems that we face in our neighborhood and the surrounding areas. A lot of blight, a lot of, because our neighborhood is the original area that Erie was established, most of the homes are well over 100 years old. And even if they were built in the best ways with the modern standards and with the best best materials, that's a lengthy period of time for a building to last and exist and thrive. And most of these homes were not built with the best materials. So we have lots and lots of blight for lots and lots of reasons. One of those is absentee landlords. There's a lot of property that is owned and lived in, not by the person, is lived in, not by the person that owns the property. And often we have landlords that don't care very much about their property or the people that live within them. And then for the topic of today, as most of you I'm sure are very well aware, we have a food desert in the area. And so we are an area that lacks adequate resources, adequate accessibility to healthy and fresh fruits and vegetables and foods. And our overall mission is lengthy, but I like to summarize it by saying my job is to make this the best neighborhood to live, work, and play. And that's no slight to the other neighborhood groups that you're going to hear about later. We all do work hand in hand. You'll hear some overlap of our various services. I always like to think of it that we, as the neighborhood groups focused on City of Erie, are trying to recruit and encourage people to feel safe and comfortable living in the city of Erie. It's not typically that someone is really dreading over whether they want to live in Sister St. Joseph's, our West Bayfront, or Best neighborhood. It's, do I want to live in the city or do I not want to live in the city? And so we all work hand in hand and try and encourage people to see the city as a home destination. Next slide. So I have a smattering of ideas on here that I just wanted to cover and talk about of how we first started getting into this work. When I started 10 years ago, we really had very little that we were doing in terms of trying to improve the accessibility of foods in our neighborhood. We did have a commercial vendor who was running a corner store. It's a small corner store that was at 3rd and Parade. It was ran by Orsini's Market. It did have a variety of items. We helped her with some grant funding and was able to produce hot meals, had a produce section. I always like to say she had cans of squid on the shelf. And to me, that's not your typical corner store. So we had a lot of variety available in the store. But when she decided to retire and no longer operate that venue, I tried to recruit some other replacements. We talked to some vendors that are looking at expanding into the downtown area, like Whole Foods Co-op. We talked to Urbaniacs Markets, all about operating another facility in our neighborhood. No one was interested at that time. And so we decided maybe to move on and try a different idea. And we created Eats and Arts. Eats and Arts was our version of a farmer's market. Gretchen should really have gone first because we're all following the lead of Sister St. Joseph's and what they have successfully established. But Eats and Arts was our sort of version of that. We wanted to have fresh fruits and vegetables. We began recruiting farmers to sell their products at our market, but we also had other items like soap makers, photography, and artists. So others were selling things beyond just food. And you can see we did that in the summers of 2015 and 16. We tweaked it. We changed where it was. We changed when we did it. We tried to do things to try to improve our overall market customer base. We never had as many vendors as we thought. Everyone tells you you should start a farmer's market, and they act like the farmers are going to come out of the woodwork. That is not true. We put a lot of effort into hosting those 2 summers, and we basically came to the organizational idea that it wasn't worth the value that we were getting out of it. Those that attended loved it, but there just wasn't enough of them to really justify the vast amount of human resources and costs it had in hosting it. So we started directing them to other opportunities. Next slide. You can see some of our other items. We had farmers, we have gardens throughout our neighborhood.
Oh, Jeremy, I think you may have just muted yourself. Okay, we're back.
I did, but that's because I had to move your faces so I could see what I actually put words on the screen. So it started with a project called Operation Blueberry. This was kind of an amazing project where a group of interested volunteers approached us, and they had a simple idea. They wanted to plant blueberry bushes throughout the city of Erie, and we have lots and lots of land. All that blighted property that I talked about earlier, Best has acquired lots and lots of land by removing blighted properties. We currently own 76 different individual properties. Some of that is land and buildings and rentals and rehabs, but most of that is vacant land. So they came in and they helped us. You see in some of the pictures, establish some blueberry bushes. The intention was just to grow free fruit for people that walking by could see the beautification and help themselves to it. That sort of expanded. The next year, we started establishing community gardens. We have grazed garden beds at 4 locations throughout the neighborhood. We've partnered, you can see in some of these pictures, with a group of master gardeners that runs the Emmaus Gardens project. They also worked with the St. Benedict's Refugee Program, and they bring in refugees to garden at our different areas. And then the far right-hand side, you can see our urban orchard. We have at 6th and Parade planted fruit trees, 28 pears, apples, cherries, all and peaches, all with the intention of raising fruit that is welcome to the public that walks by. And so we're beautifying an area, but also trying to produce free fruit and vegetables for those that live in our neighborhood. Next slide. So what is Best working on next? We are continuing to look at ideas that are in Erie Refocus, implementing those and moving our entire community and our neighborhood forward as far as the progress that is expected. We are still focused on food as an issue. We have a number of projects in the works that are food related. We also have our next Vista project that we've written for, which will be someone specifically to work on these few food items and maybe help build our capacity in that area. I'm going to mute myself again to move my. We also are tightly focused on problem properties. So we are looking at those properties that really are dragging down our neighborhood. That number is reducing, thankfully, year in and year out, but there's still quite a few individual properties that are a nuisance, both in their condition and those that are attracted to use those properties. We're looking at amenities. So what attracts people to want to live in our neighborhood? In some cases, that is a food related project, like our gardens, if we would have a farmer's market or other food outlets, but it's also artwork and beautifying our neighborhood so that people feel like they want to live in our neighborhood. And then we continue to collaborate with government and other nonprofits working together, creating a city that's desirable and people choose to live in. So those are the things I just told to highlight, the sort of top level things we've worked on in the past and are currently working on. My contact information is on the slide and easily available through the leaders of FPAC if you want to ask me any other questions or get a hold of me after this.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. And with that, I guess we'll move on to the next one. Anna, you're up.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me. I'm here to speak on behalf of our West Bayfront, which is Best's counterpart on the west side. You can go ahead actually and switch to the next slide if you'd like, Gabrielle. There we go. So that's the footprint that we serve. It's basically the mirror image of the Best footprint. We're just to the west of downtown Erie, home to about 13,000 residents in a grouping of neighborhoods. We actually consider it multiple neighborhoods on the west side just because of the size of this part of the city. And our mission is very similar to Best's because we kind of have modeled ourselves in many ways after both Best and Sisters of St. Joseph Neighborhood Network. It's to improve the quality of life for residents in this part of the city. We're faced by many of the same challenges that much of the urban core is dealing with. We do have a very diverse population and obviously many great assets to support the work that we're doing. We're a much newer organization, having been set up about 4 years ago, but similarly small. So it's myself as executive director, and we have an AmeriCorps Vista that's working with us as well. But that's it in terms of full-time staff. I'm happy to share a little bit of what we've done related to food, but while it's a part of our overall vision for the community, we haven't done anything like what Best and Sisters of St. Joseph have been able to accomplish. It just hasn't been a focus of our work, I'll say that. So we really welcome ideas and support and involvement to be able to address some of the food-related challenges that we know exist in the community. I think you can go ahead to the next slide. So a couple of things we do, and we try to sort of rely on partnerships and collaboration whenever we can. So one of the ways that we've tried to improve access to fresh fruits and veggies in the neighborhood is by bringing organizations and farmers markets into our community. These are some pictures from West Bayfit, which is a summer activity recreation series that we hold in the summertime at Bayview Park. That's the park that now has that new Erie sign you might have seen in the news. So not last year because of COVID, but in previous years and hopefully this year, we'll be out there once a week in the summertime, and we invite the Sisters of St. Joseph Neighborhood Network Urban Farm, as well as other local farmers markets or others to come to that event and have that as a way for them to make their produce available within the West Bayfront community. This has been very, very popular. I feel like it's a win-win as long as the farmers markets are able to provide that access to us. We know it's not without their own challenges, but the residents of the West Bayfront really like being able to just walk up the street and pick up some local produce. So, you know, one of the things we've learned and we've heard from folks like Gretchen and others is how challenging it is to launch a farmer's market. So we knew that we weren't going to be in a position to do that on our own. This is sort of a, you know, the second best strategy to be able to have an open air farmer's market. Next slide, please. And then community gardens. So again, not nearly the scale of what's going on in Best, but we do have some community garden beds. These are at a park at West 4th and Poplar Streets. In terms of opportunities, and I should say that I think that, you know, what we're seeing with these beds is they're maintained by local residents, but they're not necessarily being used as sort of a primary source of food for the folks that are planting there. My impression is that really to get this type of gardening to really serve the needs of families, we need to have a more robust sort of systematic approach to community gardening. And we just haven't been able to launch something like that. I'm hoping that with Groundworks USA, which I think Erin and Kathy will talk about later, that's the type of initiative we could sort of scale up to. But this is sort of, you know, individual families gardening their own little beds. And then neighbors come by and certainly help themselves to the veggies, which is okay with everybody. There are a number of other community gardens in the West Bayfront at the schools. And the Gannon Goodwill Garden is also within the community. But we would like to be able to do more of this because there certainly are locations and vacant lots that could be available for this type of gardening. Next slide, please. And then another area that we have worked on, and COVID definitely made this you know, apparent, the need for this kind of outreach. So as COVID was hitting last year, we wanted to make sure that people in the community were aware of the resources that exist within Erie, particularly around food access. So we coordinated a number of outreach efforts, going door to door with flyers and getting them out in the community with all of the various food pantries and free, you know, suppers and all the food related resources that might be available. And our hope was that people who maybe have in the past weren't in need of these types of resources would, you know, they'd find themselves with easy access to them if we were delivering this information directly to their doorstep. So I think that's something that we will, you know, try to continue just in terms of getting that word out about what's available in the community, even once we're past the pandemic situation. Next slide. So a couple, you know, opportunities / challenges that I see in the community. Again, lots of vacant lots available for community gardening, and a number of existing community gardens that some of which really could use more help and support. You know, the spaces are there, but they don't necessarily have the people, the volunteers that are making sure that the gardens are planted and maintained and so on year after year. So definitely a need for coordination on that front. We know we have volunteers that are interested in gardening. So that's an opportunity there. There's a huge demand for food related businesses. We've been doing surveys and plans. And for example, we've done a survey recently on regarding West 8th Street, which is where a grocery store used to be located and closed several years ago. Nearly every one of the respondents to that survey said they wanted to have a grocery or food related business back on that street, you know, right within the neighborhood. We've got a great network within the neighborhood of community centers, food pantries, schools, the university that I think can all play a role in this type of work. And then one thing I should also mention is the little free pantries, I think are serving a really important purpose in the community. There's several in the West Bayfront that people seem to be, using frequently as a go-to spot for food. I think that's it on that slide. And I think that maybe is my wrap-up slide following. Yep. So this is my contact information. And of course, I'm definitely interested in brainstorming and figuring out some solutions to some of these challenges. Thanks again for having me.
Thank you so much, Anna. And that will wrap up our second speaker. So now we're moving on, as has been mentioned multiple times. Sorry, I'm not sure where I got muted there, but our next speaker is Gretchen at the Sisters of St. Joseph.
Hello. Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm going to try and keep this as brief as possible. I could talk forever about this, so please utilize my contact info at the end. So yeah, I'm from the Sisters of St. Joseph Neighborhood Network. I work specifically at our Little Italy office. We started in 2000. Well, the idea became the idea started in the late 90s as a partnership between the Sisters of St. Joseph and primarily St. Vincent Health Center at that time, as a way to revitalize and bolster the neighborhood around the hospital, and then grew from that into what is now SSJNN. So our mission statement is revitalizing a neighborhood and empowering its people. Our boundaries for service are 12th to 26th Street, Cranberry over to East Avenue, which we like to refer to as the heart of Erie. So you can see our service area there, and then our east and west side locations. Next slide. So our mission there covers a lot. We have many different programs under that mission of revitalizing and empowering the neighborhood. Some of them are more traditional social service things, like our soup kitchen and what I'll talk about here. A lot of them are focused on physically revitalizing the neighborhood, working with the neighbors there for crime reduction, turning around blighted lots, doing facade improvements, new sidewalks, lots of things like that. But for this slide and the next one, I'm specifically just talking about our efforts to address food insecurity, which was identified when we surveyed the neighborhood, in 2000. So that food was the #1 thing that came up on the surveys. So it's long-standing need, as many people are aware. And so from that, our first ministry was started by neighbors and partners at St. Paul Church, and that still is in operation at West 16th Street. And that we've continued through the pandemic, just all to go. So it looks very different. There's a lack of, food brings people together, and it is a way to have conversation and community and congregate. So that is definitely missing from our soup kitchen, but it is definitely still going strong throughout the pandemic and meeting that basic need. So some of these pictures are from the soup kitchen, and then some of the pictures are from our emergency food and hygiene items that we distribute in Little Italy. That's been a long-standing effort. However, during the pandemic, when some of our neighborhood food pantries, namely like Sacred Heart, St. Paul's, shut down because they were not having any volunteers come out, we picked that up and for several months took on essentially being a food pantry, so food distribution during the first several months of the pandemic. So that's what the pictures on the right side are there. Challenges during the pandemic are, like I sort of mentioned, that the meals are all to go, so staying in contact and connecting to neighbors, and lack of things like food drives. That's starting to pick up now, but always like funding and the food drives, things like that. And the biggest one, I would say, because we're a small staff of 7 and we have about 300 regular volunteers to run all of our programs, was for us the lack of volunteers with all of our efforts. So that was certainly a challenge. Next slide. Okay, so this is the final one, and my title is not executive director. As Gabriel said, we all wear several hats here, but basically rather than a title, I deal a lot with our gardens and our teen program and running our farmers market, as well as marketing and small grants and other things during the off season. So this one is not specifically tied to the pandemic, but this is something that we've been doing. Our first garden down on the left-hand side there, International Flavors along West 18th Street, was started in 2008. So we've been doing it a long time with lots of wonderful volunteers and partners and funders. They are places where we do grow food for about 60 families now on our 8 lots, but they're also places of beauty, like Jeremy and Anna have mentioned, and places to beautify the neighborhood and have a peaceful spot in the neighborhood too, in addition to the food. So since 2012, we've been running the market, and in 2013, sort of coinciding with that, we started our teen worker program, both to help in the gardens and give them a sense of ownership of them, and to work at the farmers market. And it's been a really great, successful program. Oftentimes it's the first job for the kid, and then maybe they can get a job somewhere else, like at our neighborhood shops. Even though we are in a food desert, like some of the kids have gone on to work at Larry's Market or Seraphin's, or we like to use it as a gateway to get the kids into the workforce. So as I mentioned, the farmers market is that is on the 300 block of West 18th Street. We've started that. We started that in 2012. It's Mondays, June through September. And one of our key things with the market is that we incentivize SNAP, WIC, and FMMP purchases so that folks can have buying power and get some great local food from, while also supporting local farmers and our kids. And it's a great experience for our kids, all the farmers. In normal times, we have, in addition to all of the food, we have local musicians come and play, or children's activities. Or definitely the health department has been a great partner with that, and doing children's activities and different recipe cards, all kinds of things like that. So it's a great hub for the neighborhood, and similar challenges as I mentioned in the other slide, but the safety measures definitely at the market this year. A lot of people felt safe, and we had more than 4,000 people come out to the market over 12 weeks. So it was very busy, but it took a lot of extra work to rope everything off and spray paint all of the fields so that the vendors were spread out, and to have someone at the gateway to remind everyone to wear the mask. So lots of things like that our staff had to chip in and do, because we did not have our regular volunteers doing that, like greeting and setting up and running the food stamp machine. They're definitely, throughout the almost 10 years we've been doing the market, there's just been an increase in demand. We have about 10 to 12 farmers now. We started with 3, and the demand just keeps going up. So yeah, I think that's it. We can go on the next slide. Oh yeah, so I would love to chat, or people can always find me at the market. As I mentioned, it's pretty busy, so if you want to have a longer conversation, just give me a call or email, but I look forward to meeting all of you in person. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Gretchen. And I can corroborate on the smooth operation of the market this year. If any of you guys are going there this summer, keep an eye out for Flagship Farms. That's USCRI's urban farm project. So we'll see you guys there. Next up is our county executive, Kathy Dahlkemper. Take it away.
Thank you, Gabriel, and thank you everyone for inviting me to be part of this. I want to thank the Erie Food Policy Advisory Council for working really to improve food access and food education, and for supporting our local farmers. I put this first picture up because I just want to remind everybody that, we're a big county, and the city of Erie is one piece of it, but 2/3 of the people actually live outside of the city of Erie, and many of them live in a place that looks like this picture. And those are our farmers. Those are the people who are doing much more of a mass production of food. and really, really important piece of our community. So I look at things from a very much of a macro level. What I try to always make sure I'm thinking about the whole county as I'm thinking about all of these issues, knowing that food insecurities happen both in the urban core, in the suburban areas, and in the rural areas. And so I'm always looking at that, from that aspect. And a top priority, of course, for my administration is how do we improve the health of this community? And obviously, access to good, healthy, nourishing foods is key to that. Some of you may not know, but I'm actually a dietitian by training. Spent many, many years as a clinical dietitian, as a dietitian working in the community. It's just in my bones. So all of this, I have a big garden myself, and I eat a lot of fresh produce in the summer and fall, and then I eat a lot of frozen and preserved during the rest of the year from my garden. So it's really, all of this is really near and dear to my heart in terms of who I am as a person. So with that being said, if any of you have never looked at the Community Health Improvement Plan, it's actually on the county's website. It is a product of the Erie County Health Department. In there, you can see some of the big issues that we deal with in the county as a whole. 12% of Erie County adults report consuming fruits and vegetables 5 or more times a day. So that means the rest of everybody doesn't consume that much. And so that's obviously just one small indicator, but a pretty major indicator of sort of the health and welfare of our community. Obesity rates are very high, as are rates of poverty. And I think we all know that also our rates of poverty are above the national and above the state average. We have 12 food deserts in the county of Erie. 10 of those are in the city of Erie, but a lot of people don't think about food deserts out in the more rural areas, but we have 2 food deserts out that way. And of course, I think most of us know that means that at least 1/3 of the residents live more than 1 mile from the nearest grocery store or supermarket. And so food insecurity is an issue throughout the county. So we can go to the next slide. So Emerge 2040 was a plan, was originally called Destination Erie. And it was a 25-year plan. So 2040 is the 25th year. So that's hence the name Emerge 2040. And Anna Frantz was involved in that quite a bit as we finished the plan and got Emerge 2040 going off the ground. But if you look at the piece on there about community health, the third recommendation is provide Erie residents with better access to healthy and local food options by supporting local agriculture, by local initiatives to eliminate food deserts and other barriers to healthy diets. And then the actions underneath that talk about expanding the Buy Local, Buy Fresh program, marketing CSA opportunities and encouraging more farmer participation, and develop farm-to-table programs in Erie County schools. There's still much work to be done on this, but I bring up this plan because a lot of people forget that we have it. A lot of people never reference it, and a lot of people never even look at it. But I would encourage all of you, with the work that you're doing around this and really other issues within your scope of work, to look at that plan because it is our community's plan, and we are moving a number of things forward, but there still is much work to be done in this area. And you can go to the next slide. So again, back to the urban and rural, the issues are often similar, but sometimes they're different. One of the things that I'm really proud of in Erie County is our ag preservation program. Pennsylvania really leads the country in this, and many of you may not know this, but there are thousands of acres preserved. And in Erie County, we've got many, many farms where their land is preserved for the future. You just think about our waterfront along the lake, stretching east and stretching west, some of the most sought after land. And when you have a farmer who may be struggling, if they could sell their land and somebody could put in a bunch of houses, they could raise a lot of money. But if that farm gets put into preservation program, then it's saved for farming, not only today but for future generations. And so it's a really important program that we do in the county through the Department of Planning and Economic Development. And Community Development. So that's something that I think you should all be aware of and be very proud of that we do here in Erie County. And we also seek to develop that farm to table program in our Erie County schools. We have 13 school districts. I think that's always important to remember too. There's many different school districts in Erie County, and they are that blend of that urban, suburban, and rural experience. And so those children come to their lunch table with many different experiences. And there's a great program. I think Doreen is on, and she, I know, has been involved in this in the Erie School District to teach kids, you know, that apple doesn't actually come from the grocery store. It actually comes from a tree or whatever it is that, you know, you're doing. And that's why it's fun to see the blueberry planting in the city of Erie. And so that children can begin to understand where their food actually comes from and have a better appreciation for that. And then of course, you're all talking about, you know, things like, you can go to the next slide, the community gardens. Really, really important. I love to see them throughout the region. And I'll tell you that there's a great community garden out in Albion. So it's not just in the city of Erie, but it's in all of our more urban settings or our boroughs. You don't really see a community garden out in the middle of maybe more of a rural footprint, but when you've got a community like Albion or Carey, you know, places like that, having community gardens is important there too. So I can't say enough and thank enough all of the organizations who are on with us tonight and all of the organizations throughout Erie County that are working on these community garden projects. And the Erie County Department of Health continues to be a partner in many of these efforts. And we will continue to be that partner going forward. So you can go on to the next slide. So the Public Health Department. Well, if nobody knew what the Public Health Department did or that they were existed in Erie County, they know it now. So the past year, of course, has been nothing but COVID for the most part. Finally, we're back to doing some of the more regular work of the health department, but it was all hands on deck for the fight against the pandemic early on. And many of the issues that we ran up against were access to food. So again, we really depended on our community partners to help us with that. We had CARES Act money. Over $5.6 million was distributed to nonprofits, many of our nonprofits who do help to feed people, whether it be the Second Harvest Food Bank in the more macro level, or whether it be down to our soup kitchens or our food pantries. We also had a great partnership with the food bank. Early on, we had an isolation and quarantine facility, which most people actually didn't even know about, but there are certain people in our community who could not quarantine, who had COVID-19 in their particular place where they lived. It was just impossible. So we would house them and we would feed them. And that went on until very, very recently. So the food bank would assist us with that. So there was just a lot of different efforts going on that the health department was engaged in around food insecurities. And we know that there's still a lot of food insecurity going on in our community, but thankfully the federal government is putting more money in to the SNAP program and being able to continue to give people the resources they need as they continue to navigate through this very difficult economic period. I also just want to mention that when we talk about Public Health 3.0, this is actually a model we were working towards prior to the pandemic in the Public Health Department. And I think I saw Nicole Bolash is on here today, and she could talk about this much better than I can, but I'm just going to talk about it in a really overview site. But Public Health 3.0 really looks at those social determinants of health. And it really takes us to that 21st century public health model. And so there's 5 themes: strong leadership and workforce in terms of public health, strategic partnerships, which we're talking about some of those here tonight, flexible and sustainable funding, which has always been an issue for public health. We do think that is actually going to change because of the pandemic. The federal and the state and the local are seeing that public health has got to be funded adequately. Our economy has been devastated because we didn't have good public health that helped us in the beginning to get through this pandemic. So that has to happen. And we do believe that there'll be quite a bit of funding put into public health as we come out of this pandemic. timely and locally relevant data, metrics, and analytics. And one thing the county has been doing here is to get better data, to work interdepartmentally to get that data. And we have been working on that a lot. We've actually brought on a number of employees who are going to be continually helping us to do that. And that will help us to make better decisions going forward. And then foundational infrastructure. So those are the things we're looking at. And all of these things will tie into the issues that you're all interested in when it comes to access to good, healthy, affordable, and nourishing foods. So check out the Community Health Needs Assessment and the Community Health Improvement Plan on our website, and you can get a lot more information about what's happening at the health department from that. If you can go on to the next slide. And one of the last things I want to bring up is the Blue Zones project. It's actually, hopefully you've all heard of it somewhere along the line. It's actually occurring in Carey right now. They are in their second year, finishing up their second year of this project. It's a 3-year project, but we hope to be able to extend it beyond that. And there are 9 principles basically of becoming a Blue Zone community. And Blue Zone communities are the places in the world where people live the longest and the healthiest. But a piece of that is also, having access to good, again, nutritious and healthy foods, affordable. And so we hope, and we are working towards taking the Blue Zones project into all of the county. How that's going to happen, we're not exactly sure, but right prior to during the pandemic, we had to stop an initiative we were looking at taking it into all 13 school districts, because right now it's only in the Carey School District. And that's a great way to get the entire county involved in Blue Zones. So we're now getting back to those conversations of how we can get the Blue Zone project into the whole community. And I guess I go back to Public Health 3.0 and the social determinants of health. This is a measurable model, and it's the model of all models we've looked at that really is the gold standard. And I'll go back to the Emerge 2040 plan because it fits into 2 of the recommendations there. One is to make Erie County communities and residents healthier by establishing a broad, active, and accountable community health partnership focused on implementing and periodically reassessing the community health improvement plan. Through Blue Zones, we would be able to do that, and then engage and incentivize Erie companies, organizations, and residents in creating a healthier region by beginning a health and wellness accreditation program. And this would lead us to this. And I'll say one thing: as a county government, as an employer, we are actually a Blue Zone certified business. So we have a CSA here. We have healthy foods in our cafeteria. We have better vending machines than we've ever had. We have stand-up desks. We have all sorts of things to help our employees live a healthier, more vibrant life. And we want that for everybody, not just Erie County employees. And you can go to the last slide. I guess it's my second to last slide. But we can't forget about climate resiliency, because in the end of the day, if we want people to be healthy and we want to have access to good foods, we have to make sure that our climate is taken care of, that the environment is taken care of. And so there's a lot of work being done on this, and I'm not going to go into that, but I just want to throw that in there as a reminder to everybody that the issues around climate will have a grave effect on access to food. And I know probably everybody on this call is aware of that and engaged in some way, but I just think it's always good to remind all of us that all of these things are interconnected. And then the last slide is just my contact information, I believe. There you go. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. That was fantastic and extremely comprehensive. I guess now we'll pivot to the other government group that we have here with us today. That's the City of Erie, and Erin Carey is going to speak on behalf of them. So take it away, Erin.
Hi, thank you everyone for the time today. We really appreciate it. As Gabe said, my name is Erin, and I'm the neighborhood planner for the City of Erie. And I'm going to speak a little bit today about our Groundwork USA initiative that is just getting underway within Erie. So I'll talk a little bit about what Groundwork USA is, and then how it came to be in Erie and how it's coming to be in Erie. And then also, some potential early actions that folks might want to be involved in moving forward with the initiative. And I'll also acknowledge too, people, we've had Anna and Jeremy and Gretchen all speak to things that are happening within our neighborhoods in the city. And that's really where this initiative grew out of, is we're seeing neighborhoods groups trying to meet needs, particularly around food and around, blighted properties. So we're hoping that this can, bolster those efforts and come alongside it and work with our neighborhood organizations to, move food security forward in Erie. So look at the next slide. So a little bit about Groundwork USA. So this is a national nonprofit organization that establishes these independent 501c3 organizations around the country. So they all have the similar mission, which is on the screen, that has to do with developing the physical environment, working alongside neighbors and promoting environmental, economic, and social well-being within communities. So currently there's 22 trusts around the country. And the closest to us would be Buffalo and then Cincinnati. So currently there's 22. So we've applied to be the 23rd trust established in their network. So on the next slide. So what does that look like tangibly? What kind of projects does a Groundwork organization work on? First and foremost, their mission has to do with equity and inclusion. So making sure that the folks who live in the neighborhoods are at the table for the projects that are being implemented, making sure that their voices are being heard and that they're involved in the projects. Some of those projects include things around healthy communities, which is probably most relevant to this group. And those are things like food justice and food access, community gardens, urban farms, community greenhouses, that kind of thing. Climate resilience, so planting trees, stormwater management, housing weatherization, all those kinds of things. Transforming brownfields. So a brownfield is land that has hazardous material present. So that could be anything from a blighted house that has lead and asbestos in it to a factory. Urban waters, so that's creeks, streams, lakes. It's probably pretty obvious here in Erie County. And then youth development. And this is a crucial part of every Groundwork organization. It's a required piece by the national network, is to make sure that each organization is preparing the next generation of environmental leaders. The next slide. So one of the things that drew us to Groundwork USA was their national partners. So Groundwork USA comes from a partnership between the National Park Service and the Environmental Protection Agency. And these two agencies come together partially in funding and then also just in technical support to this national organization, and then by effect all of its local partners. So again, that's a very exciting piece of this initiative, is that you have that federal support. And the next slide. So in Erie, what does it look like so far? It's been quite a long process, and like I said at the beginning, really came from our neighborhood organizations and the work that they were doing, pointing to the things where there are gaps, where they are trying to fill the gaps, where it's not necessarily within their mission, but they're doing it because it needs to be done. So kind of trying to take a holistic look at what's happening in our neighborhoods, and how can Groundwork USA come in to support things that are already happening and where there are gaps. So with that in mind, in July of 2019, the city of Erie, we submitted a letter of interest to Groundwork USA. And then in October, we had a site visit from Groundwork, and many of the organizations on the call today were involved in that, and we visited sites in their own neighborhood. In January 2020, we submitted a full application to the program. And then in May of 2020, the feasibility study process began. And that's the process that we're in currently. And you can see on the screen all of our partners that have been at the table for that feasibility study process, it really came out of a group called the Erie Neighborhood Growth Partnership, which is a coalition of all of our neighborhood organizations in the city. So we had those folks come together again, and they committed a lot of time and resources to helping this feasibility study get underway. And we're nearing the end, rounding the end. So hopefully within the next month, that feasibility study is going to be sent to the federal partners that I mentioned at the beginning, which is Groundwork USA, the EPA, and the National Park Service, and then they would make a decision on whether that feasibility study is approved. But we really like this process. It's very thorough. It makes sure that your community is ready. It makes sure that you have the right partners at the table and that you're thinking about all of the possible angles that a groundwork organization in your community could approach. So on the next slide, you'll see some of the initial things that our committee has put together as some initial priority projects for a Groundwork Erie. And we kind of split them into 3 groups. So the first grouping of projects would be residential brownfields and neighborhood revitalization. So these are things like tree planting, tree maintenance, developing a greenway that stretches throughout the entire city, vacant lot cleaning and greening, urban creek education and maintenance, demolition and deconstruction of blighted houses, and then also industrial brownfield community engagement around sites, larger sites in the community that residents have concerns about. And there are some photos on the right-hand side. Some of those are from other groundwork organizations, and then some of those are local pictures. On the next slide, our other 2 focus areas, the required piece, which is youth and young adult development. So we've suggested high school aged employment opportunities and then young adult employment opportunities in all of the neighborhood focus projects, and then also these food justice and security projects as well. So youth, young adults would be working as part of this organization at its core. And then our last piece is food justice and security. So working with our existing partners at Erie Farm to School, and then also developing a community greenhouse, possibly an urban farm or an orchard. And then also doing some SNAP and WIC outreach to develop that program as well with our other partners. So these are some of the initial projects. None of this is set in stone. I mean, so what happens from here? So the committee is going to hand off the report, and hopefully it will be approved by our federal partners. And then we move into the process of identifying board members, hiring an executive director, and kind of launching it out to be its own independent organization. So that's very exciting, but we were hoping that this kind of gives that organization the groundwork to be successful in Erie. So on the last slide, and this was one thing that came to our attention in the planning department. On the next slide, this is a site at 16th and French. It's the old Quinty site. It was recently acquired. It's about 4 acres, and demolition is going to begin this summer. So when we reached out to the Food Policy Council, we kind of had a question in our minds about how can we use this site, and is it possible to potentially use it to help solve some of these food access issues that we're thinking about with it being in a food desert. I don't have any other answers other than that around this specific project, just throwing it out to get people thinking about this property, this location. The new owner is very interested in having community input. So to take a look on the last slide is my contact information. So if you're interested about Groundwork USA or about connecting about this Quinty site, please send me an email. I'd be more than happy to try to answer your questions and hopefully move forward to have more access to food. Yeah, thank you for the time today. We really appreciate it.
And thank you, Erin. Thank you all, really. This has been extremely informative. And I think that we're going to basically seamlessly transition right into our Q&A, but we did run a little bit over time. So We're going to see if there are any questions out there from the crowd. And afterward, we're going to just go right into our general meeting. So I'm going to pitch that over to our other Erie FPAC co-chair, Marty Martz. And then basically we're just going to transition right into our typical meeting. So we'll open it up for any questions that have been collected through the chat box. So I'm going to pitch that over to Alex.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today. One question I did receive, and this would be for any of the 3 neighborhood organizations. A lot of organizations have tried to start community gardens, and not all of them have been successful. Do you have any tips or thoughts as far as what has made your community gardens so successful, and based on the fact that they're still around?
Well, I'll go first. I don't know that we have any special tips or tricks, but I do know that because we have a lot of vacant space still to expand and have more gardens, I get pushed and pressure sometimes to expand and have more gardens. And I'd rather have 4 that are thriving and being fully utilized. It's sort of like where we would put them are all lots that are empty grass lots right now. And it's easy to grass, but when a garden sort of is unmaintained, it can get pretty unsightly pretty quickly. So I would say growing incrementally and being organized about it, and making sure you're doing a good job with the ones that you already have before you grow. We also know that we have a decent amount of interested neighborhood gardeners, but we're also always looking for additional ones because while a couple of individuals have more than one box, we don't have, a huge waiting list. So I don't really see, I think sometimes people think, build it and they will come. I would say wait till they come to you and then build the boxes.
That's a great suggestion. Thanks, Jeremy. Anna or Gretchen, do either of you have anything to add?
Yeah, well, so I could think of lots of tips. I guess some of the main ones for us is that you really choose your lot carefully, because sort of what Jeremy had mentioned, there's lots of people that want to have you expand or start more, but choose an appropriate lot, and also involve the people that live right close to that. And definitely having volunteers and staff that are knowledgeable and passionate about food and gardening or agriculture certainly helps. And for us, at least in the beginning, and it continues to be very popular, doing things other than just gardening in the gardens. So that sounds like a very simple idea, but like to do picnics or scavenger hunts or things that can combine education with those and engage the community. Yeah.
Great tips. Thank you. Let's see. So this question could be for anybody. Based on what you've seen from our presentations today and the work that you're doing and what you see in your communities in the city and in the county, pie in the sky is the limit. What strategy would you implement to help improve your neighborhood in relation to food access? If there was one strategy that you think would have the most impact, do you have any thoughts on what that might be?
I can take a stab at that one. I think pie in the sky, the best or the most, the piece that we would love to see is a local grocery store that's providing fresh local produce, throughout the year, right in the heart of the neighborhood. I think that's, I know there's been conversations with some of the folks on this call and in this group about opening some downtown stores and other venues. And I think that is the piece that would be most impactful for the neighborhood and meet the greatest demand in the community.
I was just going to add that that's a difficult question, Alex, because there is no silver bullet. I mean, if it was easy, we'd already be doing it, right? So. Right. I think that, all of our neighborhoods are similar, and yet they're all different, and they're all diverse. So there is no one size fits all. So Anna's absolutely correct. A downtown grocery store in a neighborhood or near would be a huge improvement over what our current conditions are like. But there are certain individuals in our neighborhood, for example, that are still going to drive to Wegmans, to Walmart, to wherever they like to grocery shop. So certain people will have lots of options, but those that don't have as many options, are really limited both income wise and in food choice. So something that gives them more choices than they currently have.
Great, thank you. Another question, I just got one for Gretchen. Is there anything that you've learned or skills that you've gained during the pandemic that will help your organization moving forward with food-related initiatives, even after the pandemic?
Yeah, so I'm sure I can't think of like a bullet list of things, but there's definitely been a much greater as I mean, we already had a great appreciation for our volunteers, but our volunteers and our neighbors who were involved, and so that's been one piece. I will say that like the enthusiasm of being able to still have our gardens and market operate, and the neighbors and the lots of city residents and people from outside of the city too, who were so enthusiastic about that and willing to still do it throughout the pandemic. That's really been a bright spot, and I think has really put a nice spotlight on the importance of local food in the city for the people that live in the city, but also, as a way to get people into the area. So it's been lots of good building on those kind of takeaways off the top of my head.
Great, thank you. If anybody has any other questions, again, please feel free to send them in the chat. Otherwise, I think we have one more question, and that is for anybody, any of our speakers today. Is there anything that you can see the FPAC or FPAC members doing to help support your initiatives moving forward?
I can say that, we'd love to have some volunteers that are kind of in it for the long haul and know their way around a garden. I think that's one thing that we really would benefit from to help us on the coordination aspect of some of the potential gardening projects that we have.
Yeah, I could see there would be, lots of collaborations. I'm not sure where everybody in the audience is from, but we're always looking for more volunteers or folks to partner, or even folks to just help us spread the word about the farmers market or other initiatives. So getting the awareness out there.
Great. Jeremy or Erin, is there anything that you'd like to add?
I was going to add something. Hi, this is Kathy. I'll speak up a little bit. I think one of the things that is so interesting about the work we're doing with groundwork, and as Erin mentioned, it has taken a lot of time, but I think that was needed to get this right. But around the issue of food security is how we make it scalable. It's with the way that Erin and I were sort of brainstorming about what we knew about the food system and food access in areas, that we have some really strong, what we call microsystems. Like I would look at what Sisters of St. Joseph is doing, which I think is probably the best model we have in the county, probably, is a microsystem, and it works really well, and it serves a lot of people. But how do we make that scalable, that provides access to the entire city? And I don't know if it's a better, is it coordination, it's a distribution. I would also say that the Benedictine sisters with Emmaus and their community garden and what they do and their food pantry, like that's a microsystem that works really well for their consumers and the residents and the people that they serve. But how do we take that idea and create more microsystems. And I think the farm to school initiative is a great opportunity where that could probably happen, because we have those farms at schools, so they're spread out throughout the city. And how do we scale those up to be, these microsystems that work then collectively and all together? And maybe that's the key. And we've been thinking about that for, can groundwork be that convener and help scale it up? So I guess just throwing it out there as an idea, and kind of think about how do we scale up the success that happens in that's been happening in some of these smaller pockets. And I think that's one of the areas where we could use some more thought and assistance. We had, I can't remember which groundwork was it that was on our call that was doing fantastic work around, was it Jacksonville? That just
Probably Milwaukee.
It was Milwaukee.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they were just doing fantastic work in their community around food and food access.
That brings something else to mind as well, that it kind of is the point of our FPAC, actually, as both Anna and Gretchen mentioned. I think maybe others did as well, but some of the surveys that you guys have put out there, or feedback that you're gathering from the community as an FPAC, we're working on projects ourselves and I hear regularly through the FPAC or just through my regular job, for people that are trying to connect with certain neighborhoods or with different communities, community members, different demographics. And as an FPAC, we'd really like to see or be kind of the location where all those people can connect and share some of that information and collaborate and communicate going forward. So that's just really exciting to hear that so many people are doing such similar and interesting initiatives. Do we have any more questions, Alex? If not, then we'll just send it right over to Marty. So I'm going to stop screen sharing here. And we have a really exciting meeting going forward. It's going to be kind of short, but it's going to be really exciting. So we have Marty, if you can hear me, it's all you.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us and for sticking with us. We're going to abbreviate our typical FPAC meeting in the next 20 minutes. And so very quickly, we have subcommittee updates. If we could hear from the Education Subcommittee first.
Hi there.
Bauer. Thanks.
Yep, I'm coming. Just trying to get my video going, so. Okay, so at our last meeting, well, we have a meeting coming up, first of all, next Thursday at 10 o'clock, if anyone is interested in joining us. And that invitation should be going out hopefully by the end of the week here. Last meeting, we worked a bit more on the next phase of the walking assessment that we've been putting together. We've been working, well, the next phase would be a survey, which, from all the speakers that we've heard from today, it's really right in line with everything that a lot of people are already working towards. And as Gabriel had mentioned, it would be a great way to pull information together. So moving forward, I know I'm jumping to our next meeting, but maybe that's something that we can put on the topic of discussion on how we can cater our community engagement survey with work that's already happening and some ideas from the folks that have been on the call here. We also discussed, in addition to our survey, we discussed the pantry / backpack program. We're working towards a culinary tool lending library, as we've discussed in meetings prior. We worked on a survey for the school directors because we're really trying to gauge an interest, existing resources, and any restrictions or concerns that might go along with implementing a lending culinary tool library in schools, so students can have access to tools if needed, that they can then take home. So what else? We also talked about a potential partnership with Wildfield Farms for food distribution. And we still have some kinks to work out, or not kinks, but just things to work out with that. But I can definitely tell you that I'm going to be assisting on Thursdays with Stephanie from Wildfield Farms, and pulling together some research and information and questions in regards to providing more fresh food locally to people in her community. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you for the update. Alex, did you have anything to share for the policy subcommittee?
Yeah, so I sent out the minutes yesterday so that we could kind of save some time here. So check that out if you have any questions. Our next meeting is going to be April 1st at 1:30, and Stephanie Steiner will be joining us, and we'll be talking about Erie's urban ag policy and allowing hoop houses or high tunnels for season extension. So an exciting project coming up. If anybody would like to join us, all are welcome. But that's all I have.
Thank you. That is absolutely the quickest we have ever gotten through the subcommittee reports. Leanne and Irko from the Erie Whole Foods Co-op had asked to speak about their interest in opening a grocery downtown. So Leanna, if you're still here, we'd love to hear more.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, I'm Leanna Naratko. I'm the general manager from the Whole Foods Co-op. And thanks for scooting me into your agenda here. So the co-op is considering opening a small format grocery store downtown. It's going to be in one of the buildings that's being renovated by the EDDC. We are doing some listening sessions. I've already got quite a bit of feedback, but I want as much feedback as possible. So the listening sessions are Sunday at 5. We have 6 in-person seats that you can sign up for at the co-op, but then I'm also going to toss the link into the chat. And you also can find the link on our Facebook and on our Instagram. But the idea is just, first of all, the board hasn't decided on whether or not we're going to proceed with this project. And so we're trying to figure out what would we need to do as an organization to be an asset to the community downtown. Price feedback is really the most frequent that we're getting. So we're looking at our product statement. We're trying to figure out which are the staple items that we need to source at the absolute bottom price, and how do we subsidize those with maybe more specialty items that people are willing to pay a higher margin for. So that's a bit of what the internal conversation looks like, and a little bit of what we're talking about at the listening sessions. Although also I'm noticing in the news articles, a lot of people are thinking that it's a Whole Foods market. So the listening sessions also cover the background of what a co-op is, and why you want a co-op instead of, a sole ownership kind of grocery store in that location. So if you have contacts that this is part of their work, or if you know people that live and or work downtown, please send them my way. Also send them to the listening sessions, but there are plenty of people have sent me direct emails too, and that is also fine. But I'm really just trying to figure out what are the staple items people are looking for. What are some other feedback that I should know going into this project? And then I'm also tossing my email into the chat here. And I think I have some of your information already that I'm going to be reaching out to you, so you can probably expect a call from me or an email at some point. And then somebody asked me if the meetings are advertised on Facebook, and they're shareable. So yes, we're going to post about them. We post during the week, and then we also post on Sunday to remind people, and the posts are shareable. That's all I have.
Thank you for taking a minute. And that is really exciting. I think that you are answering the need that a lot of people have been discussing today. So we're excited for you. And if you send me a link or whatever, I will definitely provide some comments.
Wonderful. Thank you.
So we do have about 12 minutes. If there are other updates that folks would like to provide, we have time to share.
I had just a question. I didn't know if anyone in this group had any update on the commercial space that was built by EMTA at 14th and French, you know, where they've done their expansion. It was a transit-oriented development with parking garage. And then they had a space that originally when it was built, it was going to be, you know, the thought was it would be used as a food hub or a food hall. And this was many years ago. And I was just wondering if anyone in this group or if this group has discussed that project or know if it's moving forward with any momentum.
This is Ashley. Can you guys hear me?
We can.
Okay, because I'm in my car, so I can't look at my phone. I just have to see it. As both a board member of the FPAC and of EMTA, I can speak to that briefly. So the space is actually ready to be leased out very shortly, and anybody who has inquiries about it, I can direct you to Chuck Peters from Altair Real Estate if you're looking for a space. COVID was realistically the delay that happened to put this all behind, primarily because that was finished with federal funding. And so basically COVID happened and the feds began paying attention to something completely different, and transit kind of had to shift its focus. But we are still accepting vendors, and I have put it out there that if the co-op was still interested in a downtown location, EMTA would be happy to welcome that discussion. We had reached out to some other grocery stores in the past, and for example, Aldi requires a dedicated parking lot, et cetera, with certain amount of space for their tractor trailers, et cetera. So there were a lot of grocery stores that it wasn't going to work on that kind of scale, but we are certainly open to that. And I've also spoken with Steph Steiner from the Education Subcommittee, or Steph Sauer. Sorry, when there's two Stephs, I get confused occasionally. About occasionally hosting a farmer's market down at that location, since that is really a great location because all transit lines do lead there, and so everything could start and stop, and any person, you know, within Erie County should then be able to access that space.
And Ashley, remind me, what was the square footage of the space? Do you recall?
Off the top of my head, I do not. But I know it was looking for maybe it's even been a while since I went on the tour. So I think there was enough space for 4 or 5 smaller kitchen type areas, and then a larger dining hall area to be shared. And then there was a larger commercial space kind of off to the one side. But off the top of my head, square footage, I am not sure.
Okay. Is it publicly being promoted? Is there a website, or does Chuck have something up where someone who might be interested, we could direct them to, or is it a call?
As far as I know, there is nothing public. That unfortunately is not my subcommittee, so I sit on finance, not on that particular subcommittee. But I could definitely find out, or if anyone, I could place it on the roster for our next EMTA meeting if people would like countywide kind of a more in-depth report out on what's going on with that, and then that could be a little bit more accessible for people.
Great. And another reason I ask is because it's right across the railroad tracks from the Quintee site, which we were looking at. So I was, didn't know if there was a connection that could be made potentially there as that site's cleaned up. But we can talk more about that, just throwing it out since we had a few minutes.
Yep, absolutely. Always happy to try and get that site moving again. I'm really looking forward to it. So.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Go ahead. Sorry.
I do have a quick question actually for Leanna. Are you guys planning on having numerous listening sessions, or okay, so I thought you said 5. It's at 5.
Yeah, so it's at 5 p.m. and because we're a co-op and we're community owned, the process is going to be as open and cooperative as possible. So all through March, it's actually the same presentation every Sunday at 5, which is background and then early feedback. And then if our board decides to proceed, then in April, we'll have more discussions that are going to be for like around what is actually happening and getting feedback on that. So there is almost endless opportunities for people to give input.
Awesome. That's fantastic. I was just curious. That's actually one of the things that we're looking to do as well as an FPAC is moving forward, gather feedback, as I was mentioning before. And however you guys go through that process and what kinks you might find, we'd love to hear your story.
For sure. And I also was thinking when the neighborhood associations were talking, they were saying they've collected surveys. And I'm just kind of wondering if anyone would be interested in sharing with me just the overview of what, if they have food staples that particular people are looking for, or because that's a bit of the surveying that I'm doing, but doing it by myself. So it's a little slow.
I think that was my survey maybe that you were thinking of. We unfortunately didn't ask that level of specificity. It was more just a general, we need a grocery store kind of conversation.
Leanne, I'm sorry, did you say, how are you doing the survey? Is it just through the listening sessions or do you have something, I'm sorry, how are you collecting that information?
I do have a link I can put in the chat. It's a Google form right now. It is really primitive, but it's just how we're getting started. So let me pull this and I'll drop it in the chat, but I also share the link at the listening sessions too.
So is that something that we could share through the city, through our neighborhood, or our apps, our neighborhood watch? How wide did you want us?
It really can be pretty wide. We're trying to filter by zip code so that we know that the people in the zip codes we're serving kind of have a priority. But the more feedback, the better. So yes, let me pop this into the chat. And then if anybody sees, because this is a survey that we put together almost last minute, if I were to be totally honest, if you see any flaws, let me know and I will fix them in real time. I realized the last listening session I did, we didn't have an age range for 45 to 55. So weird little things like that have, I'm worried will become a challenge as I go on. So if you notice anything, let me know, because I meant to look at this a little bit better before next Sunday, but there is the link.
Perfect. Thank you. I'll make sure that gets shared on the FPAC Facebook and social media as well.
And just an observation, I think Gabriel and I had talked about this before, that if you are considering selling locally grown produce, the folks that work through his WRAP program are growing the food that those communities want to eat anyway. So some of the things that they brought with them, and I think that those would be, as opposed to iceberg lettuce, perhaps they would be super excited to find some of the things that Gabriel's farmers are growing in their market, in their local market.
Yeah, I was going to say something along those same lines, at least speaking anecdotally for our residents. Like the things that are the most popular at our farmers market are things that you can't find at, Walmart, say, or Price Right or something. So lots and lots of collard greens, lots and lots of very hot peppers, specialty Asian eggplants. I mean, lots of things that are going to be popular with the folks. And I also would just sort of put my 2 cents in there about for both of those locations, it's very exciting with the co-op and the EMTA one. Those are both great spots, but hopefully people are considering some kind of market bucks or things for incentivizing the SNAP and WIC shoppers, because that is really a hit and really so popular with our folks. And just also another 2 cents, because we're always asked this. I know a lot of people in the group probably already know this, but think of, while I wouldn't consider myself a full-on farmer, I do farm with our teams and we're asked constantly to come do the Northeast market or Meadville or all these other markets, and just definitely consider when we're talking about farmers markets, we all know there's a need for them, but definitely consider the farmers, and a lot of them are one man or woman operations that maybe don't want to do a farmer's market every day of the week. So anyway.
And Gretchen, since we have a couple minutes, that's a great point that you bring up about the SNAP and WIC eligibility. And would you mind going through a little bit of the process of what it's like, or what it was like for you, if you remember or were there at that time, to get certified? I know it, Alex, I know knows a lot about that as well, but as somebody that's gone through it, would you mind speaking on that for others that might have to do that going forward?
You mean for the farm to be certified, or
for like a vendor or a
oh yeah,
a point of
okay.
sale to be certified?
Yeah, it's pretty similar to that of like what a neighborhood market would do to be certified to accept food stamps. So there's certain things that you have to carry. There's certain register tape. There's it has to be attached to someone's social security number to be registered. But the process is pretty easy. But I guess there's lots of places. There's Larry's Market. There's lots of neighborhood markets that accept SNAP. But when you can stretch that dollar a little bit, it really, that's what I was referring to, I guess, with that. But yeah, I'd be happy to talk to people outside of this.
Leanna, I assume that Whole Foods already does accept SNAP. Is that correct?
Yes, so we do. And it's in my notes. I'm going to email Gretchen to talk more about this, about how to incentivize it. And then we also are working to get WIC certified. So up until July of this year, our product statement wouldn't allow us to carry some of the products, especially formula, that we would need to be WIC certified. That has changed. And so we are working on getting WIC certified too, prior to an additional location opening.
Any other comments? I guess we will go ahead and wrap up, just 1 minute over. Thank you all for joining this new special speaker series. We hope to do this quarterly. If you have ideas on topics that you would like to see us focus on, please share them with either Gabriel or myself. If no one has further comments, then you have a few minutes of daylight, and it's still 60 out here in Edinburgh. So get outside and enjoy. Have a great evening.
Bye. Have a great night, everyone.